The daughter of the millionaire lived in a world most people could only dream about. Mansions, chauffeurs, designer clothes that changed with the seasons, and doors that opened simply because of her last name. To the outside world, she had everything a young woman could ever want, but anyone who stepped too close soon learned that luxury was not the same as peace. From a young age, she carried herself with an attitude that intimidated even the boldest. Her words could cut through anyone's pride, her glares could silence a room, and her stubbornness was legendary. Teachers tried to discipline her, but she made a game of breaking rules and watching them crumble. Tutors came and went like revolving doors, each leaving with frustration etched on their faces. She thrived on proving that no one could tell her what to do, that her world belonged only to her. Her family, despite their wealth, had no power over her either. Her father, a man used to controlling entire corporations with a single command, discovered that his daughter was the one person who could not be managed. Board members bent to his authority. Employees feared his disapproval, yet in the halls of his own home, he was powerless. He tried stern lectures, bribes, and punishments that involved stripping away privileges, but nothing touched her. If he took away her car, she would hire a driver. If he cut off her credit card, she would manipulate friends into paying for her desires. Every wall he built, she found a way to climb over, leaving him exhausted and humiliated. Her mother, long accustomed to the glamorous distractions of high society, had grown detached. She loved her daughter in the only way she knew how, lavishing her with gifts and excusing her behavior with the tired phrase, "She'll grow out of it." But she never grew out of it. Instead, she grew sharper, more resistant, more determined to prove that no one held authority over her. Family dinners were silent wars, filled with glares and sarcasm. Holidays turned into staged performances for outsiders, where the family pretended to be whole, while cracks widened beneath the surface. Friends, if she could be said to have any, rarely lasted. They were drawn to her energy at first, her confidence, her defiance, her ability to live without consequences, but they always left. Some left quietly, drained by the storms that followed her everywhere. Others left loudly, broken by betrayals or cruel words she wielded like weapons. She had companions, yes, but trust was never part of those relationships. She let no one close enough to see her vulnerability, no one worthy enough to understand why her rebellion never seemed to end. In truth, she was lonely, though she would never admit it. Every time she pushed someone away, a part of her ached, but she buried that ache beneath layers of pride. At school, she was both feared and envied. The wealthy children looked up to her, wanting her approval, while the teachers walked on eggshells, praying she wouldn't make their lives difficult. She thrived on the whispers that followed her down the hallways, whispers of her power, her father's influence, her reputation as untouchable. But when the lights dimmed and she was left alone in her room, silence pressed against her like a weight she could not shake. She had the biggest bed, the finest sheets, and still she lay awake, restless, staring at ceilings that offered no comfort. Her defiance wasn't born from nothing. It came from years of being treated like an accessory rather than a daughter. Her father was always busy, his affection measured in allowances and gifts rather than time. Her mother cared for appearances, ensuring she was always dressed right, smiling at parties, and seen as the perfect image of wealth. Yet no one asked her what she wanted. No one listened when she tried to speak. Slowly, she learned that acting out was the only way to be noticed, even if the attention came in the form of anger or disappointment. Rebellion was her language, the only voice she had in a world that silenced her. As she grew older, her storms became more destructive. She skipped classes, crashed parties, got into fights, and laughed when the consequences never touched her. The police officers who caught her driving recklessly didn't dare write tickets once they learned her name. The schools she was expelled from always softened their reports, afraid of upsetting her influential father. Every mistake was erased, every punishment delayed, and every act of defiance reinforced her belief that she was beyond reach. The world had given her power, and she wielded it like a shield. But behind that shield, cracks formed. There were nights when she stood before the mirror, her reflection lit by the faint glow of city lights spilling through her window. She would stare at the girl looking back at her and feel a sudden, overwhelming emptiness. Who was she, really, when all the chaos faded? A spoiled brat? A rebellious daughter? Or just a girl who wanted someone, anyone, to see beyond the noise? These thoughts scared her, so she buried them beneath louder storms. Better to be feared than to risk being invisible. Better to be untouchable than to let someone in and watch them walk away. The millionaire's daughter had mastered the art of being uncontrollable, and the world had accepted it. Teachers stopped trying. Friends stopped caring. Family stopped hoping. They all decided she was impossible, a storm they could not weather, and so they let her rage unchecked. She was powerful, yes. But it was the kind of power that left her isolated on an island of her own making. She believed no one could ever reach her. No one could ever break through. And for a long time, she was right. Until the day fate placed her in front of someone who had nothing she valued, nothing she feared. Someone who didn't bend under her storms, but simply stood there, steady, unshaken. Someone who would make her freeze. The single dad never thought his life would cross paths with someone like her. His world was built on survival, not luxury. He woke before dawn, packed school lunches, ironed wrinkled shirts in the dim light of a flickering bulb, and hurried through long shifts, just to make sure his little boy never went without. He carried exhaustion in his shoulders, and quiet strength in his eyes, the kind that only came from years of doing everything alone. While others saw him as ordinary, almost invisible, he had a resilience that couldn't be measured in bank accounts or influence. Life had taken much from him. His wife, his dreams, his ease of living, but it had also taught him the raw power of patience, of listening, of understanding. That was the armor he wore, and it was stronger than money or pride. When he first encountered the millionaire's daughter, he didn't see the storm that terrified everyone else. He saw a girl, restless and guarded, who had built walls so high that no one dared to climb them. He noticed the way her eyes flashed when she wanted to push people away, and how quickly she folded her arms like shields. Most people flinched at her defiance, but he didn't. He had been through worse storms in his own life: grief, poverty, nights when his son asked questions about a mother he barely remembered. Her sharp words didn't cut him because he had learned long ago that anger is often just pain in disguise. Others tried to handle her with control. They barked orders, imposed punishments, or attempted to buy her obedience. But he approached differently. He didn't try to dominate her or shrink in fear before her reputation. Instead, he simply treated her like a person. When she lashed out, he didn't argue. When she tried to provoke him, he didn't rise to the bait. Instead, he listened, letting her words spill out without interruption. That patience unsettled her more than any scolding ever could. She was used to winning battles, used to seeing people fold. But here was a man who didn't fight and didn't surrender. He stood steady, as if her storms were nothing more than passing rain. She tested him in every way she could. She mocked his simple clothes, his old car, the way he worked with his hands, instead of issuing commands from a desk. She sneered at the fact that he lived in a small apartment with peeling paint, raising his son with secondhand toys and budgeted meals. But no matter what she said, he never flinched. Instead, he would sometimes smile faintly, not mocking, not superior. Just calm, as though he had already survived battles far harder than her words. And she hated that smile at first, because it didn't belong in her world of control. What she didn't know was that his strength came not from wealth but from love. Every morning, his son's sleepy smile reminded him why he kept fighting. Every bedtime story, every scraped knee he kissed, every hug before school hardened his resolve. He had learned to give without expecting return, to sacrifice without being noticed, and to carry burdens without complaint. And when he looked at the millionaire's daughter, he saw the same emptiness in her eyes that he sometimes saw in his own reflection. That loneliness, that quiet ache for someone to just understand, was something he recognized instantly. The more time they spent together, the more his presence disarmed her. He didn't chase her approval or fear her wrath. He simply showed up, consistently, like the steady rhythm of a heartbeat. She wasn't used to that. She was used to people trying to impress her, trying to escape her, or trying to control her. But this man, This single dad with nothing to his name except quiet resilience didn't fit into any of her categories. He didn't want her money. He didn't want her father's favor. He didn't even seem to want her gratitude. He just wanted honesty, and that shook her more than she wanted to admit. Slowly, she began to notice small things. How he listened when she spoke, not with judgment but with genuine curiosity. How he didn't rush to fix her or lecture her, but simply let her be angry, be stubborn, be herself. How he wasn't afraid to tell her the truth, even when it wasn't flattering. Most people tiptoed around her, terrified of setting her off. But when she crossed a line, he would calmly look her in the eye and say, "That's not who you really are." The words lingered, because no one had ever cared enough to suggest that beneath her storms, there might be something more. It was in one of those moments that she froze. She had shouted at him, expecting him to finally explode, to walk away, to prove that he was just like everyone else, weak before her rage. But instead, he looked at her, not with anger or fear, but with a quiet sadness that unsettled her. "You don't have to fight everyone," he said softly. The words were simple, but they pierced through her armor like nothing else. For the first time in years, she didn't know how to respond. The fight drained out of her, and she stood there silent, caught in a stillness that terrified her more than any argument. She froze, not because she was weak, but because someone had finally seen her without fear, without judgment, without calculation. That was the moment the impossible happened. For years, people had said she couldn't be handled, couldn't be reached, couldn't be changed. Yet here was a man with no power, no influence, no wealth, who had done what no one else could. He had seen her. And that truth was both terrifying and liberating. In his steady presence, she felt something she had never felt before. Safe. Not because he controlled her, but because he didn't need to. He accepted her storms without being swept away, and in doing so, he gave her permission to finally stop fighting. The world around her remained the same. Her father still busy, her mother still distant, her reputation still untouchable. But in his company, something shifted. For the first time, she allowed silence to exist without filling it with sarcasm. For the first time, she allowed someone to stand close without pushing them away. For the first time, she felt the possibility that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be impossible forever.